Former colony and dominion of the United Kingdom, Newfoundland and Labrador became the 10th province to enter Canadian Confederation on March 31st, 1949, as Newfoundland. Due to Newfoundland's high debt load arising from World War I and the construction of the Newfoundland Railroad, and decreasing revenue and the collapse of the fish prices, Newfoundland decided to join Canada. Joseph Smallwood was a person who led everyone into voting Newfoundland as a part of Canada. Newfoundland also brought more fish industries to Canada. Ontario was one of the first four provinces and joined Confederation on July 1st, 1867. In the years before Confederation, 1840 to 1867, what we now call Ontario and Quebec were part of a British colony called the Province of Canada. Many people in Ontario, including the co-Prime Minister John A. Macdonald, wanted to form a new country with the other British colonies, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. Ontario also brought beavers and beaver pelts to Canada.
Quebec joined Confederation on July 1st, 1867. There were five main reasons for Quebec joining Confederation: political realism, the support and power of powerful elites, the lack of viable alternatives, the nature of federalism, and special status for Quebec. After returning home from the Charlottetown Conference, John A. Macdonald asked Viscount Monck, the Governor-General of the Province of Canada, to invite delegates from the three maritime provinces and Newfoundland to a conference with the United States delegates. Monck obliged, and the conference went ahead at Quebec City in October 1864. Prince Edward Island emerged disappointed from the Quebec Conference. It did not receive support for a guarantee of 6 members in the proposed House of Commons, and was denied an appropriation of $200,000 that it felt had been offered at Charlottetown to assist in buying out the holdings of absentee landlords. Manitoba joined Confederation on July 5th, 1870. Manitoba brought thin soil, rock outcrop, and myriad lakes in rock basins are inhospitable to agricultural, but serve as sites for hydroelectric power, freshwater fishing, metal mines, and some forestry. They wanted their own government for one main reason. For the Canadian government, when the Canadian government bought Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory, the Métis were afraid that they would lose their rights. If they had their own government, it would be easier to keep their way of life. They chose a man named Louis Riel to lead them. He set up a government and would not let the people from the government of Canada take control of their new Northwest Territories. Riel wanted to make sure that the Métis would be consulted. He sent people to Ottawa to make an agreement with the Canadian government. They decided to make Manitoba a province. Saskatchewan joined Confederation on September 1st, 1905. Saskatchewan was established by the Acts of the Canadian Parliament. The population had grown, and the territories were no longer just a fur trade area. The leader, Frederick Carleton, felt that they should have the same government as the other provinces and be able to collect taxes to pay for schools and other services the growing population needed. The leader was Frederick Carleton. The region featured farming, logging, mining, and railways. Alberta joined Confederation on September 1st, 1905. The fur trade was the main reason for the exploration and development of the territory. Between 1897 and 1911, 2 million people immigrated to Canada. Many went west. About 30,000 farms were started per year in this period. More railways were built to help carry the load. Some mineral resources included sand and gravel, limestone and salt, but most valuable is sulfur, most of which is extracted from natural gas. Alberta was established by the Acts of Canadian Parliament. British Columbia joined Canadian Confederation on July 20th, 1871. The province's name was chosen by the Queen Victoria in 1858, reflecting its origins as the British remainder of the Columbia District of the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1871, it became the sixth province of Canada. In 1859, Alexander Tillotch Galt, George Cartier, and John Ross traveled to Great Britain to present the British Parliament with a project for confederation on the British colonies. The proposal was received by the London authorities with polite indifference. By 1864, it was clear that continued governance of the province of Canada under the terms of the 1840 Act of Union had become impracticable. Therefore, a great coalition of parties formed in order to reform the political system. In July 1st, 1867, New Brunswick joined Confederation. In the 1860s, New Brunswick was still a colony of Britain. The people who had settled there were mainly of English, Irish, Scottish, and Acadian background. Although the economy was strong, some people, including the leader of the government, Samuel Tilley, believed that joining Canada would be the best thing for New Brunswick. The colony decided to enter Confederation for these reasons. Many of the settlers thought that the powerful United States would want to expand northward into New Brunswick. However, if they were part of Canada, they would be rather able to defend against this threat. People thought that Confederation would help the economy by providing a larger market of their goods and a link to the other colonies, though the Intercolonial Railway.
Nova Scotia joined Canada's Confederation on July 1st, 1867. Nova Scotia had been very hesitant about joining Confederation in 1865, but with generous funding from the Canadians to counter American money supporting the anti-Confederation forces, the two colonies had become a part of the BNA Act in 1867. One of the reasons Nova Scotia joined Confederation is because the economy would become stronger, and the colonies would sell all their goods to the colonies in the Confederation, so they didn't have to send the goods across the sea. In 1859, Alexander Tillotch Galt, George Etienne Cartier, and John Ross traveled to Great Britain to present the British Parliament with a project for confederation of the British colonies. Nova Scotia had many industries, such as shipbuilding, farming, and railways. In 1871, the colony began construction of a railway, and frustrated by Great Britain's colonial office, began negotiations with the United States. In 1873, Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, anxious to thwart American expansionism and facing the distraction of the Pacific Scandal, negotiated for Prince Edward Island to join Canada. Prince Edward Island entered Confederation on July 1st, 1873 to buy out absentee landlords. Canada took over its debts and year-round ferry service. PEI joined because then they are part of a bigger group, and therefore safer from attacks from other countries, especially from America. If PEI joined Canada, Canada would buy off the PEI's land from the British. Because of the time of Confederation, no PEI farmer owned their land. They had to pay rent to the British person called absentee landlord. PEI brought potatoes to our culture, and they also brought more fish. On April 1st, 1999, Nunavut, which means our land in the Inuit language, became the newest and largest territory in Canada. It is the first self-governing Indigenous territory in North America. Nunavut covers one-fifth of Canada's land area, but includes less than 1% of Canada's population, with only 22,000 people. As a result of the largest Aboriginal land claims agreement, Nunavut was created out of Northwest Territories by the federal government as a homeland for Inuit people. The Nunavut Land Claim Agreement was signed on May 25, 1993, in Iqaluit by representatives of the Confederation Federation of Nunavut, the Government of Canada, and the Government of the Northwest Territories. This agreement gave the Inuit of Nunavut a separate territory. It is the largest Aboriginal land settlement in Canadian history. The Northwest Territories. A portion of the old Northwest Territory, entered the Canadian Confederation on July 15, 1870. But their current borders were formed on April 1, 1999, when the territory was subdivided to create Nunavut to the east, via the Nunavut Act and the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement Act. In 1870, Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory were bought by Canada, and the whole area was renamed the Northwest Territories. In 1870, the territories covered a huge area. Over the years, pieces of land were taken away to form Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, Yukon, and Nunavut, and other pieces of land were added to Ontario and Quebec. When European incursions into the area began, they encountered the hunting and fishing Inuit and Dene. Vikings from the Greenland may have been the first Europeans to venture into the eastern portion of the Northwest Territories, now Nunavut. Yukon joined Confederation on June 13, 1898. After the discovery of gold in the late 1800s, the government sent the Northwest Mounted Police there to show Canada owned and controlled the area. The Yukon was made into a separate territory in 1898 for two main reasons. The Klondike Gold Rush brought many Americans into Canada. Some people were worried that the United States would use this as an excuse to take control of the area. The gold rush had attracted many people to the region. This gave the Yukon a much bigger population and made it a more active area than the rest of the